Hello, Phil Escott in the UK. How are you doing today?
Hey, Tom, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm good. I'm good, thanks.
Good.
Crazy times, but we're good.
Yeah, certainly is. So, for those of you who don't know who I am, which is probably going to be everybody, my name's Thomas Dawson, and I'm on Vancouver Island in British Columbia in Canada. And I guess what I'll do first, Phil, is just mention how this came about. I actually asked you about 9 months ago to do a talk and to be my first guest on what I hope to be my own podcast, and you kindly agreed to do it. And I won't bore everybody with the reasons why it hasn't happened for 9 months, but it didn't. But we're here now, and Phil is kindly recording this because I still haven't figured out the technology for doing all this kind of stuff. But the reason I asked Phil to do this is because we have a whole lot of things in common. Besides our age, which is only a few months apart, we've both been into music. I never really called myself a bodybuilder, but you're into working out pretty seriously one time, and so was I. And you're into spiritual topics. And now Phil has gone down the rabbit hole and taken, I think, the red pill. And that's something that if we would have talked 9 months ago, we couldn't have riffed on this, what most people call conspiracy theories. But now you've kind of gotten into this, which is really interesting. And so maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, so we have a lot of things we can riff on now. And like I said, it's interesting times. And so I guess the first thing we'll do, Phil, if you don't mind telling the audience who might not know who you are, a little bit about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Cool. Thanks, Thomas. Well, I'm a drummer. I suppose that's what I've done most of my life. But I've also been very into the whole spiritual side of things, and I've been very much into diet and lifestyle and all the kind of health stuff, and written lots of articles and books about it. And really, I figured I was down the wrong path, and I didn't figure that out till I got very sick in 2010 with rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, same thing really. And I had to find my way out of it. And surprisingly, after 30 years plant-based, ended up fully carnivore now for 5 years. I haven't eaten a plant except a couple of mouthfuls here and there that one guy recently called me out for, saying I was a complete fraud. But, seriously, a couple of mouthfuls, that's it. That I don't think that really mars my record. And in that, I found so many different rabbit holes. And what you were saying about the conspiracy stuff, I think I'd rather drop the theory word now, because it's kind of obvious that a lot of them a lot of them are not theories. I've always been into it really, but not as much as I have since really the switch to carnivory, having found out that every single bit of diet advice we'd ever been told was nonsense. And you can, if you turn the food pyramid upside down and chop half of it off, you might get close to what we're supposed to be doing. And I think this is reflected in so many of the other quagmires of misinformation that's coming from all of the same people who are telling us about the diet thing. So yeah, I've been down those rabbit holes a lot. It's been a fun journey, and particularly recently, as we're in the middle of this pandemic.
Word I'd use.
Yeah. It's strange to go down them all. I mean, it's still a bit of a twisted mess in my head at the moment, but I think the secret that we can all find from this is to just lose the fear. You get the odd little bit of butterflies when some new information comes out, but if you can lose the generalized fear, that all day long fight or flight thing, then it's very exciting times. So yeah, that's me really.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that you'll share some of your unique perspectives that will help to maybe alleviate some fear for people, because you posted something really interesting on Facebook that I really liked, and maybe we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I'm totally on board with what you're saying. It's unique times, and yeah, it's not going to help if we run around like chickens with our heads cut off and are in fear mode all the time. So I guess a little bit about myself. Like I said, I've been born and raised on Vancouver Island, and I'll try to give you the nutshell version here for how I came into my big search, if you want to call it the truth search. When I was 29 years old, I was doing just your typical blue-collar job, which I was very dissatisfied with. Same time, I tried to make the best with it, and I was able to travel during the winter, so it worked in that way, but it wasn't fulfilling whatsoever. I wanted to use my mind and to do something that could maybe help people. And out of the blue, my mom told me about this little ad she saw in a newspaper, a local newspaper, and she said there's this hypnotherapy course. And I never even thought about something like that, but it just, for something that I never even heard about, thought about, it just kind of intrigued me. And the good thing about the course was that I could just take the first weekend, and if I didn't enjoy it, I didn't have to do the other 9 weekends. And it was quite an intensive course of 10 months and a full weekend once per month. So I took the first weekend, just thoroughly enjoyed it, and I ended up going all the way through the course, becoming a certified hypnotherapist. And that's what I'm hoping that maybe I can bring to the table today, is give you guys a little bit of a unique perspective from somebody who has been a hypnotherapist. I did it for a living for a while, had an office and everything, not so much anymore. But the funny thing about the hypnotherapy course is I got a lot more than I bargained for. Our teacher actually brought up the topic of mind control and programming. And that kind of intrigued me, because when he said that we were being programmed and there's actual mind control techniques, I thought to myself, well, I want to learn about this, not so I can use mind control on people, but so I'm not going to become a victim of it. And so I got into all this stuff. Now, at the same time as I'm learning all these mind, body, spirit healing techniques, there is a person from the next class who, I guess we must have had a bit of a conversation, and I said that I was really curious as to why our world is in such a mess. And so the next thing I know, he's coming over for a visit, and he's got all this material for me, and it's alternative information. And I started digging into it, and it just started making sense as to why our world is as it is. And next thing I know, I'm looking into 3 major topics, and I wanted to know the truth about, is there a God? If so, what is he, she, or it? Is there life after death? Do we have a soul? Do we come back? All those questions. So all at the same time, I'm trying to learn about nutrition and holistic healing, the topic of spirituality, topic of what some call conspiracy theories. And as I'm sure you found, you can get confusion in all of them, because you got all these different nutrition gurus telling us one thing and then the other thing and all points in between. And it's like, well, what do I believe? And it's the same with spirituality. I was reading New Age stuff, and it sounded maybe a little woo-woo, but I thought, well, you never know. And then the conspiracy theories. You got different people saying different conspiracy theories. So I had all this stuff. It was like a full-time course for several years of just trying to discern what I thought might be accurate versus what might not be. And that took me a really long time to try to come out the other end and not to be depressed about what I did find was going on. But fortunately, I did have the spiritual side, so that did help to balance things out a little bit. But anyway, to make a long story short, after all those years, I started writing some books about my journey, and they're called the Getting Real in the Unreal World volumes. And so I just got right into all those things, and here we are today. And there's so much to learn, and as I've heard you say too, I totally agree. The more I learn, the more that I realize what I don't know, and that there's just more to know yet. So I'm with you on that. So with that said, I'd like to give a little disclaimer, and you can give yours if you want. I'm not a medical doctor. whatever we get into, I can't give medical advice. I can't diagnose people. But of course, I have my opinions, and I encourage people to not believe anything that I say. And I do in my books too. The first thing I said was, don't just believe everything I say. Use your own discernment and listen to all sides of the story. Listen to opposing opinions, and use whatever level of intelligence you have to make up your own mind and take accountability and responsibility for what you decide to do. Now, the funny thing about that is that, to me, that's something that an honest person with a bit of integrity would say. But have you ever heard Mr. Fauci or Dr. Fauci or Mr. Gates say something like that about, what they're saying? Never, right? So that should be a sign to people.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe
If people are not using the Buddha disclaimer to doubt everything, including what I say, there's some sort of other agenda there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first topic I'd like to get into, Phil, is I think one of our favorite topics, and that's spirituality. So if you don't mind, would you tell the people what's your concepts about, I don't know, it's some big questions maybe, but how did all this, meaning life, end up happening? How did we get here? Do you believe in a God? Is it a being? Do you believe we have a soul? Those kind of things.
Well, that's enormous questions, but I think I have no idea how we got here. I really don't. I think you can only really know that if you're everything all at once, and then you might have some idea. As far as who we are, I think one of the most important things is to come to some kind of realization that everything is connected. It's a very overused term. We're all one and all of that, but if you actually experience what is going on, you become more of an individual anyway. It just feeds that. I think if somebody's caught in this airy-fairy, we're all one, and can you pass the salt? Oh well, there's nobody here to pass the salt, and all that silly sort of non-dual stuff that you can pass through. You can pass through if you have an awakening, if you like, to what's actually going on. But after a while that calms down and you stop misbehaving like that and stop using these silly terms, and I think you just go back to being a human being, which I think your friend of mine, Rick Archer, he was always calling this sort of we're the eyes of the universe. We're sense organs of the infinite, rather. We're not just individuals, but it's both and when you realize that, and you're not one of these airy-fairy spiritual type people, I think the word spirituality kind of turns me off a lot these days, because it's been so overused, and I think in both the traditional and alternative spiritual paths, it has been used as a dangling carrot. There's always something that you're having to look forward to in the future, some reward that you get if you meditate enough or pray enough or something like that, and that, I believe, is missing the entire point of it. I think when you have that realization of what's going on, you see, the thing is, I don't even these days think that it's a realization of what's going on. I wouldn't even claim that. I just think that if you have this shift into what I'm talking about, you alleviate an enormous amount of suffering and ego. That's not ego to say that you ignore all your desires and become desireless, because I think that's another complete misnomer. I think it's more that you become more of yourself without the tremendous desire to be right all the time. All we can say is we're going along this path with an open mind, we're following our desires and our passions and our paths in life, and we have found information that was better for alleviating suffering than the previous information we had. And I think that's about the best we can do. Anybody who's claiming to have the ultimate truth, I think this is nonsense, because there are so many people who also have ultimate truths, that they're claiming to have, and
exactly.
And it's the truth is a very subjective thing. So for me, I think a lot of these awakenings happen when people throw out their dogmatic spirituality. For me, it was actually in that second, and I've never quite lost that vision since. That it's not a vision, but that basis, that awareness of the canvas on which we paint all of our experiences, it's never been lost. I mean, momentarily it gets lost. You can get angry, you can get frightened, you can all sorts of things can happen, but it's gone in a second. And if you ever go, oh, hang on, where's that canvas? There it is. And you can always see it, and you can always refer back to it. And that's the beauty of it. It's always there, but it doesn't cripple you and stop you following your path in life. When I see a lot of my spiritual friends, I see that they're caught up in somebody else's dogma. In my case, the TM movement, Transcendental Meditation, and they seldom begin a sentence without saying Maharishi says or something like that. And this, I think, is really allowing their power to be taken away. So my view of spirituality now is claiming all your desires and your path in life and finding it. I think a lot of the problems that happen in spirituality and religion with abuse, whether it's financial or mental, emotional or sexual, comes from repressing all of that kind of thing. And when look at the Catholic Church, it's chaos, and when you're repressing that sort of thing, it's going to come out on an altar boy or something, and this is the downside of all of that. Whereas the essential truths of all religions are exactly the same. If you hear the words of Jesus, "Be still and know that I am God," and that's really the only bit I think you need to cut out of the Bible and just kind of meditate on that, and you'll probably get somewhere. The rest of it is all a little bit confusing. So yeah, that's where I am at the moment. I don't really think about it day to day. In fact, it's lovely to be able to talk about it, because usually I get asked to come on and talk about carnivory or something like that, or light and EMFs, which is great. It's great fun, and I really enjoy it, and I'm really privileged to be able to do it. But it's nice to be able to get into this stuff too, and then relate back to carnivory and all the other stuff and ancestral disconnects, and put this into the mix as well, instead of just, okay, eat ribeyes all day and everything's going to be fine. It's looking at all the disconnects that we have from our ancestral heritage, and on all fronts, and putting them all together, and in that sort of bucket of influences, you can often find health and happiness.
Yeah, beautifully put, Phil, and I'm on board with everything you said. It must have come as a bit of a surprise to you when all of a sudden you got into this carnivore diet, and you went from being spiritual Buddha at the gas pump guy to having all this hatred being directed to you by people like vegans. So
well, oddly, some of the worst hate that's ever been directed towards me was on a Buddha at the gas pump Facebook group. Where
is that right?
Well, Rick kept tagging me in these things where, every now and again somebody will put up, "Do you think we should eat meat?" And then of course there's a horde of people underneath going, "No, it's disgraceful, and this spiritual teacher says this, and this one says that," and you look at them and they all died of cancer, or they got diabetes or something, and you think, oh, okay, Rick, I'll comment. But then eventually I ended up getting warned, for my horrible misinformation. And eventually I just bailed out of it. And Rick didn't tag me anymore. I love Rick. And if it hadn't have been him tagging me, I wouldn't have thrown myself in the lion's den. But those were some of the most savage ones. But strangely, a lot of those people over the years have come to the carnival group that I've got on Facebook, and then ended up in my Beyond the Beyond group as well, where you get the people who have discovered carnivory and also discovered that even that deepens the spirituality and grounds you as well. That's lovely to see that so many people are spiritually they're coming round to this idea that it's really not about eating lentils, and taking Ayurvedic medicines, and there's so much more to it than that, or rather so much less. It's really simple.
Yeah. And I think that's a great thing to take note of for people to ponder, is that be careful about what you're so critical of, especially if you're going to be saying things in a nasty way, because you never know. You could totally change your mindset, and the next thing you know, you're doing the very thing that you're criticizing and being nasty to somebody about. So I'd like to mention that, try to keep an open mind.
I absolutely agree. I mean, the amount of times that vegans have sent me death threats or attacked me or something, or had wishes that my kids would be taken away, and yet I'm patient with them, because I've noticed that over the years, a year or two later, they'll come to me and say, listen, you were right, and my thyroid has blown up, or my guts are in tatters, or something, and they need a lot of help. And I understand that it's a brainwashing thing, and there needs to be some deprogramming, and you can't start that procedure until somebody's ready for it,
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to have you on as my first guest, Bill, because you do have just an attitude that I like about all this, and so I give you lots of commendation for that. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about my perspective on spirituality, for whatever it's worth. Keep in mind that this is just my philosophy, this is my concept. I can't say that it's any absolute truth, but my basic idea is that there's something, the words I use is pure awareness, pure consciousness, and that's beyond any descriptive words. It doesn't have a dimension or a form or a color. As best as I know, it always has existed, always will exist. And then I don't know if there's a point in time where some people call it the Big Bang, where it came in from formless mode into formful mode. But I think that I don't like to use the word levels and realms, but I think that there is perhaps a first realm that some people might call the Christ consciousness level, and then maybe that was like the master computer, that all the thoughts were organized, and then it came into what some people call oversouls, and then from oversouls sprouted what we call individual souls, or points of consciousness. But my overall concept, and mine differs largely from what a lot of New Age people say, is that this is all just pure awareness, exploring all possibilities. That's what it boils down to. And in exploring all these possibilities, it doesn't just explore nice things and happy things and rainbows and unicorns. It explores the whole range from what we label as dark to light, and all points in between. And that's why we have on this planet, we have everything from what we could call saints, the lighted people, to the most evil, dark people that we're calling, maybe certain people, and all points in between, because it's exploring all possibilities, and it's getting to know. There's a saying, as above, so below. And human beings, our nature is curiosity. And some of us are curious about nutrition and spiritual topics. Some of us are curious about what we might label as depraved topics. And so ultimately we're all, how do I put this, us seemingly separate human beings are all ultimately part and parcel of this pure awareness that's just exploring all possibilities. I guess that's my summed up version. What do you think about that?
I think that's spot on. Absolutely. I can't criticize any of that at all. Yeah, perfect.
But the one thing I guess that I might differ on, that some people say, is that God is pure love. I don't personally go along with that. My thoughts are that if God was this pure love, that we'd be expressing nothing but pure love. And of course that's not happening. My concept is that this pure awareness is more actually a neutral consciousness. And that's why it'll explore all different possibilities, because and we don't have a loving universe and all that kind of stuff. Now, here's a question I'm going to throw at you.
I definitely agree with that one.
Sorry, go ahead.
I definitely agree with that, because that's very judgmental. We enjoy love because it feels so good. We chase bliss because it feels so good. And yes, you can induce those states, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Most of the real progressive work we do is at times of suffering, when we're not feeling very loving and we're not feeling very blissful. So, totally agree. Sorry, what was your question?
Well, I'll put that out for a second because you brought something up that's kind of important. A lot of New Age spiritual people are only into positivity, and they don't want to hear anything negative. And one of the things I would say to that is, if for instance, you unfortunately found you had cancer, would you totally ignore it because that's negative? If you're a firefighter and a house is burning down or a forest was burning down, would you ignore it because it's negative? No, I think we have to be open-minded to exploring both the dark, so-called dark side, and lighted information, because if we're only willing to listen to positive messages from angels and things like that, I think we're putting ourselves in a little bubble world. And what can happen to bubbles? They can be burst really quickly. And the next thing you know, you're ill-equipped to deal with the reality of, for instance, what's happening right now. There's a lot of people who are probably really scared right now. I feel for those people. But they might have lived sheltered lives. There's so many people nowadays that are actually quite comfortable in the Western world, and they're not used to adversity. And people have lost all their skills that were completely normal in the past, like fishing and hunting. Now, a lot of people only know how to work their phones and their computers, and they know nothing about survival. And I understand that, but I think those are very valuable skills to have personally. What do you think?
Absolutely. It's part of our heritage. And yeah, having this total focus on positivity, I think, brings about the phenomenon of spiritual snowflakery, which is so common, isn't it? I mean, there's so many people who go, oh well, I can't watch The Walking Dead, or I can't be out after 10 o'clock at night, or because I need to get. Fair enough if you're doing it for circadian biology, but if you're doing it because you're absolutely terrified that this is not the thing to do, and you absolutely have to be in bed, and this is what you need to do because the Ayurvedic cycles say, all of this weird things I've seen in the TM movement. It doesn't surprise me that so many of my old friends are coming down with cancer and autoimmunity and whatever. There's a lot of blocked emotions. There's a lot of ridiculous dietary practices. Tons of stuff going on. And as long as they're inside meditating and taking their Ayurvedic medicines, then it doesn't matter if they've got their LED lights on in the middle of the night and they've got their Wi-Fi switched on, and they're just focused on all the wrong things to alleviate that kind of suffering. And so when they talk about going back to this ancestral time, they've got this weird idea of this Vedic time where everybody was all lovely, everybody ate plants, and everybody was enlightened. I don't think there was really such a time. Certainly they didn't eat plants all the time, if back in those days. And it gives them a completely false goal to aim for. And what I love about the whole sort of where it's gone with the diet thing of sort of paleo and then keto and carnivore and all of this, it's more and more reconnecting to what our ancestral heritage was, and that I feel is much more of a worthwhile path to follow than up some guru's arse, really. I'm getting a bit fed up with them. I listened to Sadhguru going on London Real the other day, and it was just a load of old nonsense. I'm sorry. It was the same old rehashed Hindu stuff, and it was not advice for the modern world, and it's probably not advice for any world really. He had a couple of great points, but you know, it would take somebody who'd been.
What they usually do, right?
Sorry.
I say to deceive people. You've heard the term lie sandwich. You pretty much always have to have some accurate information to make it sound good and to get people to start believing you. And have you ever heard the term programming icons?
No.
Okay. Not to get off topic, but programming icons are people like some of the biggest pop stars in the world who have been purposely selected and groomed to disseminate messages that are meant to keep people basically programmed and enslaved in a little box for their minds. And I can't say with absolute certainty that this is true, but I believe that there has been a lot of gurus from the East sent over to the West who are programming icons who have been purposely giving us this lovely, spiritual path, which there is some truth to, mixed in with disinformation. And I think, as much as I might get bad feedback on this, I think Sadhguru is one of those people, because he just has come into such prominence. And when I see people being all over the place now, like on shows like London Real, I'm not saying he doesn't have some good stuff to say, but I do think that he could be a programming icon to become the big guru of our time this time.
I'm totally with you on that. I understand what you mean now. I just didn't know the term particularly, but yes, sure. This is happening with the gurus. It's happening with the pop stars, and yeah, it's very interesting. When you see how fast some of them rise up, you wonder, how did that happen? How did that happen? Yeah. I mean, I've been in the music business, and I've been with people who are way more talented than some of the people at the top, and they're not probably even the most talented people in the world. And this starts to get you very suspicious over the decades, particularly when you actually even have the contacts and you're friends with them, but it's not working and it's impossible to push through. There is definitely something else going on. Definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, again, adding my hypnotherapy perspective, just a little thing that people might find interesting is that in relation to these programming icons is that, these televangelists who do their whole big spiel and then they get the people up they do their heal thing, right? So what I learned way back when I did my course is that some of the most well-known televangelists took hypnosis courses, and when they're doing that whole heal, smacking people on the forehead, that's actually called a shock conduction. And that's why they kind of all of a sudden go collapse backwards. That's exactly what we learned in our class, was how to do a shock induction, which is how to, for instance, in an emergency situation, and I had this happen once where I came across, well, I'll tell you the quick story. I was traveling along the main Interstate 5 in Washington, coming north back to Canada, and coming the other direction, I could see a car coming really fast in the passing lane, and it started, I guess they hit the gravel, and they started weaving like that, fishtailing. Next thing I know, I started slowing down. Next thing I know, they came flying across the highway right in front of me, and I would have got smucked if I didn't slow down. And they went flying off into the bush. And I thought, oh my God, like I'm one of those people. I stopped right away, and I didn't even think about not stopping because I wanted to see if I could help. And I honestly expected I was going to come to a car full of dead people. And it was kind of scary. So I ran down into the ravine and into the bush. And I was amazed. I saw these 4 young girls. They all got out of the vehicle, and I think they escaped death because they landed in a whole bunch of bush and it just cushioned their blow. But anyway, the driver, she looked like she was the one that was injured, even though they're all walking. So I came up to her really quickly, and I saw she had a huge opening on her arm. So what I did was a shock induction. I said, look, I'm here to help you, and I can help you to calm down and to facilitate the healing process here right away. And so I did this little shock induction where I kind of go, sleep. And she just kind of went like that. And I said, okay, your body's now calming down. There's people on the way that are going to help you. Just allow yourself to go completely calm in every way. And so that's just an example of a shock induction. Anyway, the point was that these televangelists, I am thoroughly convinced, are using shock inductions on people. And I know for a fact that they took some of the courses from some of the big hypnotherapy gurus in California down there. So
that's cool. That's a cool story, man. I think you're right. I think, but I think also sometimes the ego really takes over, and it can make them even believe that they are who they say they are.
Sure, I'd go along with that too. So here's the question I was going to ask you, and a little bit of a comment first. We all know that a lot of people are into the law of attraction. I saw The Secret. I've read a few books about the law of attraction. So we also know there's all these wealth coaches as well. So I just kind of find it interesting that with all these people that are into the law of attraction and wealth coaches trying to build up their wealth and all that kind of stuff, that I'm wondering, did a whole bunch of people practicing the law of attraction have down on their dream board, I want to go into quarantine and have a world economic collapse? Point being, with all these people who are into the law of attraction, how is it even possible, if that's valid, that we're in the situation that we're in right now?
I don't know. Yeah, I take your point. I don't know, and I've never been much of a fan of the law of attraction. I think it's again something that is making people focus on something in the future rather than in the present. But I think if you just follow your life path anyway and really follow your desires and be who you're supposed to be on this planet, things tend to fall into place anyway, and you kind of make your own law of attraction without having to have some kind of technique. But as to your question of has everybody dreamed up a lockdown, I don't know. I mean, maybe people have dreamed up a really beautiful situation, and that's what they've been imagining. And as you know, there is always a healing crisis. Things very often get worse before they get better. I mean, I don't know where this is going now. I can't pretend to. But I see it in people's bodies, in their mental state, when I do consults with them. And I often see things getting worse before they get better. This is just normal. This is exactly what happens. I always liken it to popping a big spot. You know, you've got to just go for it and really pop it, and then it'll heal up. And like, that's what happens. You just got to, you know, bite the bullet and embrace the suck, as they say these days, don't they? And that's fine. But some people believe so much that life should always be really easy, whether they're Netflix watchers or whether they believe that life should be incredible bliss when they're, you know, spiritual seekers. I think that takes away from the ability to go through healing crises and recognize them for the gifts they are, because we're always told that suffering is bad, symptoms are bad, so then modern medicine comes about. Let's kill the symptom in a day, even if your liver blows up in 6 months. And it's just, it stops everybody's evolution in many ways. Everybody's just a dopamine addict. And I have to admit to it myself. You know, in the modern world, you fall into being a dopamine addict to a certain extent. But if you can be aware of it, aware of the process, and not just go, oh, well, this is what we do. Yes, we're on lockdown. Let's binge watch Netflix, and, you know, to take away the pain of being frightened about the news in the morning where all the death toll is up and all that sort of thing. Well, then you're being doubly programmed, and you're never going to get out of the loop. So you've just got to kind of break out sometimes and enjoy some suffering.
Fair enough. I guess sticking with the spiritual topic and discussing my path, at one point I was totally into this whole notion of enlightenment and self-realization, and the whole idea of being in never-ending bliss and never ever losing my temper or never even getting frustrated sounded very appealing. But the funny thing, and I know other people who've gotten into that as well, but the funny thing I found was that even though people said that they wanted to be enlightened, they also wanted to retain their personality and their ego. And of course, the gurus are often saying you have to destroy the ego. And so I was a little conflicted about all that, but I still knew that I wanted to have unending happiness and never be frustrated, never get angry. And what I found, however, was that there would be times where I'd get frustrated. And the ridiculous part was that I'd get mad at myself for getting frustrated. I said, oh, come on, you should know better than to get frustrated. You need to be able to let it go right away, or else you're never going to be enlightened. And I can tell you, one of the greatest favors I ever did for myself was that I started coming out the other side, like I think you said earlier, back to more normalcy. And I said, I'm just going to react authentically. Got a little bit of a the sun coming through some trees over there. I'm just going to react authentically. If I'm mad about something, I'm not going to hold it back. If I'm frustrated, I'm not going to hold it back. I'm just going to be, like I said, react authentically. And that was such a relief compared to having these expectations of myself, because it's almost like you're trying to achieve some level of perfection and it's unattainable. And so, yeah, I was quite relieved when I just started being more normal again. And, you know, what you're saying earlier, there is no one to, there is only the illusion of a Thomas speaking right now. All that kind of talk, that gets to me too. But anyway, if you're caught up into all this spiritual seeking, my suggestion would be that you maybe consider what I was just saying, and you might find that it's more of a relief just to not have to be or react in any certain way. And I'm going to give you a little example here to illustrate my point, if you don't mind. I think anybody that drives has been in rush hour traffic, or if you've driven for any length of time, you've probably had somebody cut you off or do something that you consider to be really, really stupid. And I've certainly been in this situation, and I can be totally honest and say I've been cut off a few times, and I've gotten really pissed off, and you know, you want to yell expletives at the other person and give them the finger and all that kind of stuff, and I have. But I think the key thing to remember about all of this is that a lot of people will blame other people for making them angry instead of taking accountability and responsibility for that anger coming from within us. And that was actually the biggest helpful thing that I did learn at one point. And so after I react authentically and just get pissed off and just let it loose, I can intellectually say, hey, this is not going to help me in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, it's only going to hurt me because the person that just cut me off, either they don't realize that they even did it, or they probably don't give a shit. And they're that type of person. So either way, I'm only making myself suffer now. So intellectually, I can sort of say, let's just let it go. Because as I hope that we can get into earlier, stress is the type of thing that can hurt our own health. And if you're stressed that often, if you're a really angry person all the time, that is going to affect your health. And so the next thing, I have a little process I go through, and I say, okay, I've reacted authentically in the present moment, but now that's gone, that's done. So let's just move on to enjoying the fall colors or something like that, and just let that go as quickly as possible, realizing it's not going to help me to retain that anger and replay it over and over in my head what I would have said if I could have caught up to that guy and given him a piece of my mind. Just let it all go and just move on and go back to enjoying the day if you're enjoying the day before that.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's important that people realise there will always be these emotions, as long as you're in a human body. It happens. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
I either do a similar thing to you. It sort of seems to happen naturally now, and I'll get cross with one of the kids or my partner, but there's no residual problem from it. It's like I'll blow up and then I'll go into the kitchen and get a drink or cook something. I'll come out again and I can see that they're sort of looking at me like that, and I'm like, why are they like that? Oh yeah, I got angry. I go, listen, that's gone completely. There's nothing. There's nothing to worry about. But in the situation of a car, I used to get kind of angry with people, mostly when I was a motorcyclist, when the stakes were very high, if somebody cut you up, you know. But now I quite enjoy the English language. I like colourful language. I love swearing. I think it's brilliant.
I know this.
I love shouting at people. I love, you know, when it's used perfectly. You know, these people use fuck every other word. It's not good. You've got to put the correct colours in a palette, you know, and put it on the painting. But if somebody is annoying and slow or a bad driver or something, it's usually when they're really slow. And I've got the kids in the car. I do it with or without the kids in the car, actually. I'm a terrible dad and they get exposed to some dreadful language, but I'll do it. I'll do the same thing, and I'll just see how creative I can get with what sort of names I can call them. And I'm laughing. The kids are in hysterics. And so I get to enjoy both the aspect of having a go and shouting at the ridiculously slow motorist, but I also have that real delight of creating language, which I love. And just having a laugh, because I've always had a particularly a sort of infinite sense of humour. Really, there's very very little that can go and shock me. You know, this side of paedophilia. I have pretty much a disgraceful sense of humour, and so I can laugh at anything. And I think that helps me through the times when I can't be totally chilled. I can always find the funny side in something. And so that's my well, it's not a technique, it's just kind of what happened with drivers now. It's all the same stuff comes out, but I'm amused. It's like sometimes I'll get cross with the kids, and if they're sort of looking a bit worried like that, I'll say in the middle of it, listen, you do realise that I'm not a proper dad, don't you? You know I don't mean all of this stuff. It's all nonsense. And then I'll carry on blathering again, and they're like, what's going on? But they don't take me seriously, you know. It's very rare that they ever do. If it's got to be a serious situation where they're in danger, that they'll hear some edge to my voice where they might actually have to pay attention. Otherwise, they don't pay attention to Dad at all, because they know that he's just a kid anyway. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that the one good thing about asking this whole big "who am I" question is that I'm bored with what you're saying about that. As long as we're in the human body, we're going to have some semblance of ego and the sense of self, and maybe even a little bit of selfishness. But I think that who am I question can be valuable to look into, because take for instance getting angry. I think the more that we do realize who we are as either, if you want to call it a point of consciousness or a soul, or even going so far to say I am ultimately pure awareness, it does help for that level of reaction or anger to lessen just in a natural way. Like the way I put it is that I had characteristics. I'm a Scorpio, and Scorpios are known for being jealous, and I can totally admit to that. You know, when I had my first girlfriend, for instance, I'd get jealous. But as I got into this spiritual path, I didn't necessarily try to get over it. I just realized that the more I got caught up in what I call ego nonsense and this sense of self, the more my jealousy just dropped away, to the point where I think now I wouldn't even play that game anymore. And the same with anger. I've never been a terribly angry person, but you know, if I feel somebody has genuinely wronged me, you know, my Scorpio side, whatever you want to call it, if you believe in that kind of stuff, that definitely can't come out. Usually I'm pretty calm and cool like you, but if somebody I think has really wronged me, you know, the old stinger, that can't come out. But even that is curtailed, and I'm more mellow and can let things go. So I think that the whole path of this whole who am I is a valuable thing to look into.
Yeah, I agree. I like the idea. I think it was Jeff Foster, one of the non-duality guys, said that If you can
Yeah.
accept, if you really just accept everything, and if you really can't accept something, accept that too. And I think that's important, rather than to freak out. It's like when you get ill. When I see people fighting their disease, I think they're going to have trouble. You know, you've got to accept it, and you've got to let it wash over you, and you've just got to go through it and figure out what it's trying to teach you. And that's the same with emotions too. But yeah, you were saying about the who am I question, and I think this is a very important one. But also, I think I made a video about it recently, about the fear, you know, that's going around at the moment and how to dispel it. And looking back, it's difficult for me because it sort of happened spontaneously. But now I look back, I can kind of discount an awful lot of the spiritual practices that I went through, because I think their goal is relaxation, lack of stress, bliss. It's lovely. They're great. They're great. But let's not pretend they're actually going to wake you up to what's going on and to see that canvas that everything else is painted on, that I like to use that analogy. But there are two things that I made that video about that I feel are very, very useful to people, which is the first one is, well, they're both kind of one after the other, really, but it's the dreaming one. You know, of actually focusing on a dream and saying, yeah, all right, I remember that dream. I was dreaming. This happened, that happened. The house was there, the street was there, the person was there, the zombie was there, you know, chasing me, whatever was happening. And I felt like that was other entities and other objects. And then you wake up and you don't really think about it. You say, I had a dream. But actually, if you think about that dream, all of that was you. All of it was your consciousness. And this is actually what's happening or what, maybe it's not what's happening, but the shift I'm talking about anyway, this basic shift that people, you know, the TMers seem to call cosmic consciousness, or you know, other people, the unity consciousness, a different kind of grade in the TM thing. It's sort of kind of separated out, but you get these silly sort of grades. But this little shift that people talk about, whatever comes after that, superpowers, all of that, I'm not talking about any of that. I'm just talking about that little shift where somehow the whole world changes, but it was all the same as it always was. But somehow you can see that you are not this point of consciousness. You're not this little tiny point where consciousness emanates from. The consciousness rather is, you're more like a radio that consciousness comes through. And you pick up these things. I mean, you can see it. You can see the clues everywhere in these amazing songs that people have written, where they say, oh, it just came to me in a dream, or it was nothing to do with me. Those words just wrote themselves, and they did it in 5 minutes. And you know, they didn't struggle with a notepad for 5 days. Some of the greatest works of art or music have come out from instant inspiration that you cannot help but make. And this shows to me that it's coming through from whatever you like to call it, cosmic, the collective consciousness, the Akashic record, you know, whatever. It's coming through from this, and you have been chosen, or you've made yourself open to be a receptacle for it, and how to put this information out to the rest of this group consciousness that is just kind of looking in at itself through all these individual eyes. And that's what's so beautiful for me about looking back on these books that I didn't understand. The ones that were getting really close to it, like the one I mentioned in my video that I made on having no head, the Douglas Harding one, and the techniques in there, you look at it, you're thinking, this is boring, this is just, no, I want to read stories about yogis in caves, you know, sitting in lotus for 3 weeks and starving themselves. I want Play of Consciousness by Muktananda. I want to read Autobiography of a Yogi. I want Carlos Castaneda. I want all of these. They're entertaining. But I kept going back to that book, like, what is it? What is it in there? And now it's so blatantly obvious to me. But it might not be to somebody unless you're looking at it in retrospect. But I would say, you know, if anybody's interested, headless.org, they have some very interesting exercises there to actually maybe shift you into that point. And maybe at the moment, with this collective consciousness increasing, maybe there's more of an opening for people to actually manage to make that shift. I don't know. I haven't got a clue. But I feel there might be at the moment, because people's foundations of so many of their beliefs are being rattled right now. that if anybody who's watching this, isn't somebody who's going to be watching BBC, CNN, and Netflix, they're going to be more interested in this kind of stuff. So I feel maybe there is a point mentioning this, but also about that shift, that it isn't bells and whistles, it isn't bliss, towering bliss. The reflection of it can be, if you sort of rest in it once it's happened, you do feel bliss, but that isn't what it is. That's what's causing it. I really like, I forgot in my video when I made it, the name of guy Saniel Bonder and the Waking Down movement. I love his idea when he was on Backgap. I haven't looked at their techniques or anything like that. I can't recommend them, but I did love his tagline of prepare for the disappointment of enlightenment. And that, I think, is lovely, because it's, so many people chase all their lives. I did for 30 years, chasing bells and whistles. Something's going to be enormous. There's going to, Kundalini's going to go crashing up through Sushumna, up to Sushumna, and through the Nadis and Ida, Pingala and Sushumna. It's going to get the right one. It's not going to go down the wrong one like Gopi Krishna and leave me all freaked out like after my acid days, and then it comes up to the top chakra, and all this I was imagining, and well, for me anyway, it's nothing like that. I mean, some people describe it like that sometimes, but I think those Kundalini shifts can happen independently of the experience of that shift, or at the same time, or after. I don't think it's necessarily the one thing goes at exactly the same time as another. It's so people focus on all that kind of thing. I thought of an analogy there, but it's pretty rude, so I won't even say it. So
come on, go for it.
Well, yeah, it sort of reminds me of that whole female ejaculation thing. Yeah, sometimes it happens away from orgasm, sometimes it happens during it, and sometimes it doesn't happen at all. And that, to me, is really quite similar to the Kundalini experience, with all this sort of flashing thing. And a lot of people go chasing that for years, and they get lost on that path because they're looking for something that isn't what they're really looking for, because they don't know what they're looking for, because all the gurus have built it up to be something that it isn't. There we go. That was a big long waffle, wasn't it?
No, that's cool. Yeah, you mentioned Jeff Foster. He's one of the non-duality authors that I started reading, and I really like his story because it's resonated with what I went through. He really got into the whole enlightenment. He thought he was enlightened for a while, and he was talking, the whole there is no Jeff to be talking to you and all that stuff. But yeah, he came out the other side, and now he talks about just simple things, enjoying the sound of the wind going and the sound of the birds chirping, and be able to just be in the present moment and enjoy the simple things in life. As we were discussing earlier, so many people, they're constantly needing entertainment. And how many likes have I gotten today on Instagram? All that kind of stuff. Instead of just being able to go out and be by themselves, enjoy their own company, and to just breathe in the air, enjoy those simple things, enjoy the crashing of the waves coming in. Well, I can do that because I live right by the ocean, but yeah, all those kinds of things. And what you're saying about the entertaining aspect of the spiritual search, reading Masters of the Far East by T. Baird Spalding, that was fascinating. And I was right into reading about these stories of immortal masters. And funnily enough, there was a guy on the island who claims that he had this Indian person just kind of materialize in front of him and say, you need to come to India. We need to teach you. And he said he got on board a plane and he went to India, and he went looking for this person's name. It's like right out of a movie. Anyway, I've got a rare tape of this guy telling his whole story, and he said he met these immortal masters up in the mountains of the Himalayas, and all very fascinating stuff, absolutely. But then we have to get back to work and living our daily lives, and a lot of that stuff isn't, I don't know. It can be a big distraction.
I mean, loads of things can happen after that shift too. One of the books I love, well, I got it on audiobook, and I'd recommend it to anybody who's had one of those shifts and is caught in that complete spaciness, or they're shouting at people that meditation's a waste of time, and you just have to surrender, and like I was a terrible nuisance. And then the sort of ego catches the awakening. There's a beautiful book, Adyashanti, The End of Your World, which is written not for people who are seeking, but people who feel that they've made that kind of shift, and yet they're still experiencing issues. And it's wonderful from that perspective, because very few books are written, to use another term that I don't like, for the enlightened. They're always written by people who are enlightened and are telling people how to get there, with what, or people who probably aren't even enlightened half the time, whatever that means. But this one is wonderful. I really enjoyed it. I think he's great, and Jeff Foster's cool too, because he's got a sense of humour as well. I remember seeing one vid where all he did was laugh from the beginning to the end. He's cool. Yeah. Some of them are, but it's very difficult, isn't it? Before you've had a lot of experience of that to actually pick out who are the very genuine ones and who are the nutters. And even then, sometimes you don't know.
Yeah, true. I guess before we maybe take a detour into maybe nutrition and all that kind of stuff, I just like to talk a little bit about this concept of we're all kind of like actors on a big stage, and see if that can be helpful for people. One of the examples I like to use is people that really get caught up into their ego are outlaw motorcycle gang people. Their whole thing is being tough. And maybe some of them soften up when they're around their mothers, but when they're around other guys that aren't part of their club, they're always feeling the need to act tough. And the example I use that you've probably heard before, of course, is that let's say you've got Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's playing the role of the Terminator, and he gets into character for his 8-hour shift or however long it lasts. But at the end of the day, Arnold goes, okay, day's over, now I can just go back to being regular Arnold. And he doesn't act like the Terminator when he goes home, at least I presume not. But so many people don't seem to realize that we aren't this one-dimensional actor, and there's people who are tough that are afraid to show a vulnerable side. I'm not quite sure exactly where I'm going with all this, but I guess the thing I'm getting all these weird shadows, and sorry about that, the sun's kind of coming through the trees, but anyway, I'd like to suggest that people think about when we're born, we're given a name, and then we grow up, and then we're bombarded with our parents' ideas. And this kind of ties into hypnosis here. I'm trying to put this all together as I'm yammering away here. But what happens, I'll get into a little bit of hypnosis and how it works. When we're born, we're kind of like a sponge. And we don't have the ability to assess and decide what information that's coming at us from our parents or primary caregivers, what is so-called right or wrong, or good or bad, or ignorant information versus wise information. So kids are just like a sponge, and they're taking everything in. And if you have, for instance, a parent who says, you're just a useless kid, you're never going to amount to anything, just go over there and shut up. There's some really nasty parents, let's face it. And if that gets imprinted upon that child's consciousness, they can keep growing up. And even if the parent eventually stops saying those kinds of things, that program is imprinted in their mind. And the next thing you know, they can get out into the world, into the workforce, and they can get a job. And over they'll self-sabotage. And it's all because they've been imprinted with, you're useless, you're never going to amount to anything. And the next thing you know, people are going through this little circle where they get a job, they'll do something stupid, get fired, or get get in heck all the time, and they have to start over again with another job. And that's because of these imprints. They're stuck in their subconscious mind, we call it. And they can do affirmations, say, I really want to change. They can consciously want to change, do affirmations which is say, I'm a strong and confident person and all that kind of stuff. But meanwhile, that program that's in the subconscious mind is saying, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're full of shit. I don't believe you. And until, for instance, that subconscious program is discovered and dealt with by, for instance, a qualified hypnotherapist, people can go literally their entire lives with that program and just start getting up the ladder somewhere and then fall down because they'll start drinking or doing something that'll sabotage their small successes. Now, going back to the example I was using about the outlaw motorcycle gangs, if a father says, look, little Johnny, you got to be tough. Everybody's, this is a dog-eat-dog world out there, and, you just can't take any shit from anybody, and you got to take what you want, because if you don't, people are just going to take what they want from you. So that'll get this imprinted attitude of, okay, I need to be really tough. I need to put on an attitude of being tough all the time. I can't ever show any vulnerability or show a sensitive side. And those are the kind of guys that can maybe join these outlaw motorcycle gangs. And I kind of feel for those people because they're so locked into this mindset of being a certain way, and that in their minds they actually believe this is the best way to be. But little do they know, for instance, that if they were to not worry about what people think and they were okay with showing a vulnerable side, that my concept is that the thing that these people that we're calling the Illuminati and the deep state, the thing that they just don't seem to get, because they're always taking and trying to control and manipulate, is that the greatest joy that we can find is actually from giving and helping people and, being sensitive and compassionate towards each other. That, to me, is the times when I feel wonderful inside, is when I'm giving and helping other people and seeing them make some progress, maybe from me doing some hypnotherapy sessions with them. Whereas I think, we call them the Illuminati, which means the illumined ones. I think they're far from that. They're kind of programmed themselves to believe that they need all these material things and to control a world. And if they could just let their programs go, if an outlaw motorcycle guy could let those programs go and just let his heart melt, as we might put it in spiritual terms, they might discover that they were locked into that and that they were not experiencing the joys that they could have if they would have just realized this many years ago. Of course, we all have our paths to walk, so it's not for me to criticize that people are locked into these things, but anyway, that's putting a few things together there. But that's how hypnosis can work, is we can help access a person's subconscious mind and do a little bit of reprogramming and help people to let go of their anger towards their father and to just let their heart melt and to have more compassion, to realize that they're not just the Terminator. For instance, I can wear many hats. I can be an artist one day, I can be a photographer the next day, a philosopher the next day. But then I have to go to work with and do my real job with a bunch of blue collar workers who are talking about sports. But I can riff on all that stuff, I can just play along. And I think it's very valuable to just not be limited in thinking I am just an artist and now I have to present myself always as an artist to the world, or I am whatever, you name it. I think it's very, very valuable to be able to be that unlimited person. We all have certain abilities and talents, I suppose, but trying to make a point here is that if we don't limit ourselves, I guess is the main point, we can be many different things.
Absolutely, yeah. I had to do a lot of work when I was sick to get out of it that wasn't related to diet. Lots of emotional work and stuff, and trace a lot of those issues back. And it was fascinating work. And I agree with you about the motorcycle gangs. And it's funny actually, because I'm not at all like that, but I've always been kind of attracted to people like that. I find them fascinating, and I tend to get on
So
really
do I.
well. I tend to get on really well with them. It's weird. I mean, I've known quite a lot of people in motorcycle gangs, and um,
Well, you have.
yeah, well, kind of growing up down in Maidenhead and Windsor in England, you have the Windsor chapter of the Hells Angels, and they're very, very different people when they're alone than when they're in a group. The group consciousness comes out very, very much in that sort of a situation, and they can be proper savages. And I've seen some terrible things, but on their own, quite often they're really quite sweet people, you know, and you almost feel like they want to let that side out, but they feel like they can't because there's so many shields up. It's fascinating. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we have a chapter of the Hells Angels on Vancouver Island as well. And I remember one time I was at a gas station, and I actually stopped there because I saw their chapter stop at this particular gas station in a town north of Victoria. And I, like you said, I'm very interested and there's a funny part of me that likes their attitude because they don't like rules and they don't like kowtowing to the man. And I'm that way too. I don't like all these rules. I recognize that we need them, but I don't like it. I have I'm very conscientious. I don't need to be told I shouldn't steal and all those kinds of things. And so I kind of like their rebellious nature, and I can relate to that. Some of the other things they do, or allegedly do, even though they're just a nice motorcycle and bunch of enthusiasts, right? So I don't agree with some of the other things they do. But anyway, I pulled in and I had my souped up Mopar with the engine sticking out of the hood and all that kind of stuff that I sunk all my money into back in those days. And I was just kind of curious to be around the vibe of these guys because they're all just huge guys and they legitimately do look tough. And you can't get into that group, which is another point I want to make in a second here if I can remember. But anyway, I go inside the store and there's a bunch of them in there, and I just came up to one of the huge guys and I looking up at him and I go, "Oh, so where are you guys headed?" And he looks at me and didn't answer. No expression. And I go, I remember the exact words I said and that he said. I said, "Oh, I guess you're not at liberty to say." He goes, "No, I'm not." And then on the way out, though, one of the other Hells Angels, he was coming in, and he holds the door open for me and lets me go. So you know, they are a fascinating group in a sense.
Yeah, they are. They are. Some of the things that I saw when I used to travel with the convoy, with the peace convoy, you know, and all the double-decker buses and living in teepees and any old sort of wagons people would get together to live in around the free festivals in England in the late 70s, early 80s. And the Hells Angels would come in at the weekend and try and find the big stashes of drugs and whatever and money and try and sort of steal it, and robbing people and robbing beer stalls and all kinds of things of money, and they'd cause chaos for a night, or for as long as they could stay awake, and then they'd ride off again. You know, they didn't want to sleep because they'd get beaten up, I guess. But it was fascinating seeing it, and these were some of the people I knew, and I'd look at them and go, "What the hell?" You know, you had people burning down people's stalls and people getting stabbed, and I saw the most extraordinary things in the days when festivals were actual festivals and not just propaganda machines. It was quite amazing, really, quite amazing. But yeah, interesting times.
Sounds like you got a few interesting stories there.
There's a few over the years. Cool. Sorry, go on.
One of the other things I was going to add, on the opposite side of the Hells Angels, speaking of the police, like I mentioned, I did a blue-collar job. I was a packer for a furniture moving company, and one of the contracts we had was packing police officers sometimes. And as you're saying earlier, when you get certain people on their own and they're not in their pack mentality, they're quite different. And with the exception of one guy I can think of, when I was packing these police officers, they came across as just totally normal people. It was so interesting to see how, you know, we can put on this different act when we put on a uniform or whatever else. But most of them were really cool, and I wanted to ask them all kinds of questions, you know, like you mentioned the word pedophilia earlier, and I don't know we're going to get into all this stuff, but we've heard about some of the stuff from out of the shadows, what's going on. And I was really tempted to ask him, so do you encounter this kind of stuff in your duties? But I thought, no, I better not go that far. So I didn't, but I asked him.
Yeah, probably not such a good icebreaker.
Yeah. Yeah, do you want me to pack this? Oh, by the way, do you ever attend satanic rituals and rescue mind control victims and things like that?
Yeah. So did you want to delve into the diet sort of thing while we've got into our last sort of half hour or so?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's
cool.
what I'd like to go into next, and hopefully we can offer a little bit of information, because
I was enjoying that one. I just know we could have gone on with that one forever, couldn't we, with the whole spiritual side of things. Fantastic. We should do a part 2 sometime, eh?
Yeah, for sure. With all the stuff that's going on that's in everybody's mind right now, if I could offer a little bit of helpful information, is that, we can all choose if we're in self-isolation and all this other stuff, self-quarantine, we can choose what we're going to do with all this time we have on our hands. And one of the things I'd suggest people start doing is, we know how many ill people there are out there in the world right now who are following, doing not such a great diet, and there are a lot of sick people right now. And I'd like for us to get into some things that maybe people can start considering doing, because one of the things we do hear on the mainstream media right now is that if you have a really robust immune system, you're only probably, if you do catch this alleged cerveza bug, and I'm sure people know what I mean when I say that, hopefully. We don't want to say that swear word anymore, or the YouTube police will come and get us. They tell us that we might feel some flu-like symptoms, and then we're probably going to go over it pretty quickly, and we're going to be back to normal again. So how about you start off and you tell the people, what do you think people can do to boost their immune systems, and in fact to be as healthy as they can possibly be, and maybe to use this time to study some things that when we come out the other end of this, that they will be far more equipped to handle flu bugs, if you believe that the flu is transmittable and all that stuff. We don't have to get into that, but let's even presume that it is, how people can boost their immune systems and be a far healthier person in 2 months. If we have to self-isolate for 2 months, something they can learn.
Sure. Well, I'd say there's absolutely nothing you can do, because I have to adhere to the WHO guidelines, who today I saw that they have said you should eat lots of monounsaturated fats, and you should eat corn oil and all sorts of seed oils and crap like that, and you shouldn't eat any red meat or saturated fats. And they put out another one where they're saying that there is nothing that you can do to boost your immune system. Diet doesn't work, lifestyle doesn't work, supplements don't work, and just follow the advice. And it was unbelievable. I had to post it up on my Facebook. It was just nuts, because honestly, everybody knows, even if they don't know how to do it, that's got to sound like complete nonsense to everybody. So we know that if we eat rubbish, whatever we believe rubbish to be, we become unhealthy. So clearly, if we eat the right stuff, we become healthy. Now, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. So on the one hand, they're telling us to eat seed oils and grains, and on the other hand, they're saying no diet can boost your immune system. So why are they bothering to tell us that? This is really fascinating. And let's just cut through the veganism thing. If any vegans are watching this, sorry, I'm going to be brutal with you now. I'm usually polite. It's absolute nonsense. That has never been in our ancestry. It's been fed to you by spiritual leaders and religious leaders for mind control. It's been fed to you by nutters who have had, like Ellen G. White, who's had these visions in the 1860s. And the whole Kellogg thing has grown out of that to stop everybody masturbating. This is your sunshine breakfast. It's all nonsense. You see the history of it, it's rubbish. Nowadays, it's basically getting you to eat all this, as my friend Tristan always says, the soy-based kibble, the fortified soy-based kibble, and it's rubbish, it's crap, it's not going to do you any good. Get off it now. Get rid of the brainwashing now, because this is an important time, because what the WHO say is bollocks. So, gonna have to say that. So, what can you do? You can just take every aspect of your life and say, what would we have done at this point in time, at this point in where we live 10,000 years ago? What would we have done? What would we have eaten? What would we have seen? What would we have experienced from day to day? We would have experienced natural light. Nowadays, if we even get natural light, it's coming through a window, so it's taking some of the frequencies out. All of nature is controlled by light. The light cycles, the cycle of the seasons, whether it's the longer cycles or the shorter cycles, all of it is circadian biology. This is what rules everything. So if you're stuck in screens, if you're stuck inside with LED lights or strip lights, which are awful, you're getting far too much blue light. It's always saying to your body it's dawn, or midday usually, or even worse, because even at midday you don't have the amount of blue light that comes off some of these things. So at a mitochondrial level, your cells are becoming destroyed and confused, and once you look at circadian biology, then diet makes sense. Because there's this diet guru saying this one's saying that, the Mediterranean diet's the best. Well, where the fuck do you live? You live in the Mediterranean? Great, eat a Mediterranean diet. But it's not salads and olive oil. It's a load of cheese, and it's a load of pork sausages, and it's a load of beef. You know, this is what they eat. It's not all that lovely stuff. And they're in the sun, and they have a much healthier lifestyle. So it's not down to the olive oil and salads they eat. It's really not. So where are you? You know, if you're up in the Arctic Circle, you want to be on a carnivore diet. That's the way to deal with that kind of thing. As you move down, you can eat more plants. As the light cycles come up, as the summer comes up, you can eat more plants. If you are autoimmune, if you've got any kind of issues or metabolic syndrome, seriously consider going full carnivore, loads of saturated fat, exactly what they tell you not to do, because this is the way to fix things the quickest. It'll fix your gut, it'll fix your hormonal system, and you will discover absolute miracles. Don't mess about. Don't swallow the party line, because surely people are waking up to many aspects of the party line now. So just jump on that, and you've got loads of time at home to figure it out. You know, you can go to my YouTube channel, just put my name in, or come see the website we've got at thehumanunleashed.com, and with so much information about that there. Yeah. And it's difficult to put it all in one, but actually what I've said there is enough to keep people healthy. But you can go on for weeks disassembling all the brainwashing and going into the details of every reason why this is happening. You know, you want your bare feet on the ground, you want some grounding, you want to... It's just what... It's common sense. It's such common sense. Look at how we were. Look at the state of health we were in before all these modern diseases came in, and then see what came in. I mean, shoes, artificial light, Wi-Fi, EMFs, all of this kind of thing. Processed food, veganism. No civilization has ever been vegan. Sorry. And all of these things that came in. This is not... Ancient foods do not cause modern diseases, as the saying goes. And just think about that, and structure your day so that you're sleeping when it's dark, and you've got enough melatonin produced in the morning with some sunlight in your eyes. You've cut the light at night. You've at least got Ayres on your screens. You've unplugged the Wi-Fi when you're in bed. You've got some blue blockers on if you're going to watch TV. We've got an orange screen actually right over the TV, so I haven't seen proper colours on TV for years, because you can't get the kids to wear these glasses all the time. Yeah, there you go. And this really works, you know. And this is our ancestral diet. It really is fatty meat from ruminant animals, preferably grass-fed, and you're going to see miracles in your health condition. And back in those days, we would get bacterial infections. We'd die. We'd get bad bacterial infections. We would get we'd fall out of trees. We'd get stabbed by our neighbour. All of these things would be causes of death. Infant mortality brought the average age down of these people who say, oh well, they only lived to 30 or 50. They didn't. If they got old, they were really healthy. And if we were in that kind of state, like I often say, we're in Lord of the Rings, where Tom Bombadil puts the ring on and he doesn't disappear. It's just a joke to him. because he's in a completely different state of consciousness and it doesn't really matter to him. And that's how our bodies would be with everything from HIV to Lyme disease to our present, beer-related problem. This virus. I mean, so many people, they test positive for it, they got no symptoms. It's very difficult to go into this. We go into it a lot in Human Unleashed of exactly what's going on, or the branches of alternative thought that could possibly be what's going on, that seem to make a lot more sense than the standard narrative anyway. And I think if you look down those paths, you realise that really the only protection we've got against it is to be as healthy as possible. Loads of people are exposed to it in hospitals. I've been talking to a lot of nurses and doctors, and the stories I'm hearing back, which I can't even repeat, are absolutely fascinating and shocking. But they're not contracting it, and they're really in that line of fire, and they're not contracting it. Some are, but then what is the process? But if it really was that dangerous, everybody would be contracting it. But the real healthy ones don't appear to be contracting anything at all, whether it's a virus or whether it's an exosome from the cells, are just a byproduct of the cells detoxing. So that's it, really. Yes, there is a way of boosting your immune system. There is a way of restoring your gut health, which is really probably the key to it, because a lot of our immune system is in the gut. And if you're eating plants, they are wrecking your gut. If you're eating processed food and pizzas and donuts and stuff like that, your gut's trashed already. And so some people who would eat seasonal plants, they'd never have a problem with their gut. But if your gut is already trashed, no, you do need to eat beef, salt and water for a while. Get that gut back together. Introduce things gradually. But if you go back to that is what the fastest healing diet that I have yet discovered, and I think I've tried and worked with people with all of them, and I'm not seeing results like I am. If I would say anybody would need to pay attention to is diet, light, and EMFs. So get all that out of your world. Get all the stuff of modern society. And you'll find, yes, you will shrug off a virus. I have no fear of it. I have some concerns of where this might be leading, but none of them involve a virus.
Yeah, same here. Well put. I totally go along with everything you just said, and I guess I'll start off by saying the thing that I repeated the most in my books, the Getting Real in the Unreal World books, the story of a rude awakening and inspiration is the second part of the title, is that if you only listen to one person, one institution, whether it's the government, religious, whatever, to the point where you will only believe that one person, that institution, you're often setting yourself up to be fooled, to be duped, to be scammed, to be conned, and sometimes even to be abused in some very serious ways. And so I can't urge people enough to open their minds up and just listen to some alternative explanations. We both know that there's some funny things going on with this cerveza bug and what they're telling us about it, the numbers and how they're doing the testing and all that kind of stuff. So I really want to urge people to not allow themselves to be programmed, because this, in my opinion, is a mass mind control program. And this goes back to what's called Operation Paperclip, but even way before that, this mind control programming, these people have perfected it. I have to give them props from one angle. They're very intelligent at their little agenda. They've done a darn good job of programming people. And I'm sure on your Facebook page, you've seen people that get really upset when you dare to question the mainstream narrative. I've seen it too. But the thing that all those people have in common is that they won't even watch these videos like by Dr. Shiva, and I've posted some of your Human Unleashed episodes, and I highly recommend that people watch those episodes, because you and the other three guys, Graeme, Ben, and Jeremy, are asking awesome questions that we should all be asking. And I go on everything you guys are saying, not because I believe everything you guys, because it's my own independent research is concurring with what you guys have come up with. And your last episode, where you did get in some really fascinating stuff. All the episodes are great, so I highly recommend that people do watch those. I guess what I'd add to what you said is that maybe, I don't know, intermittent fasting can be beneficial, but the part I want to really emphasize is this might be a cliche, but laughter is the best medicine. We've heard that many times. If you're an angry person, you can kill yourself by slowly but surely. That can manifest in diseases. And again, from a hypnotherapist point of view, is that the reason it'll manifest in certain areas, we call it body syndrome. For instance, if you're reaching for something and you're really frustrated that you can't get a hold of it, you'll find that physically your arm and your joints will, because we use the hands and the arms to reach for things, right? And so correspondingly, if we're reaching for something in life and we're frustrated because we just can't get it, you'll find, not mysteriously to me, you'll get arthritis and problems in those areas. And for instance, we have something we call responsibility syndrome, and you're shouldering the weight of the world on your back, and you feel a lot of responsibility. It's overwhelming you. Correspondingly, you can have stress and problems in that area. The liver, for instance, which is, we have to filter what we put in our bodies. If you can't filter if you're having a hard time filtering what you're seeing going on in life, like what's going on right now, a lot of people can't handle that. And so you can have liver problems and all kinds of things. I won't go on to it any more deeper than that, but I just want to say that if we're super sad, if we're super angry, and we're consistently in those kind of mindsets and moods, it will over time drastically affect your health. And in hypnotherapy, again, I'd see clients, if they've got a certain problem, we'll do this little timeline method where we'll look back, okay, what happened about 2 years ago? And I think you guys might have gotten into this in your last episode, but if not, that's when it started, was 2 years ago. So what's manifested right now, that started sometime back, and you got the process going at some point in time earlier than that. I totally agreed with what you guys were saying on your last Human Unleashed episode, that a lot of people have this attitude that their body's almost against them. And I hear people saying the words, fuck cancer and stuff like that. To me, that's not the right attitude to take. Your body is actually trying to protect you, or itself rather, from the stupid things that we're doing to it. Whether it's putting the wrong food into it, whether we're around those EMF signals too often. Your body is just, I call it, it's a feedback mechanism. And a vehicle, like a car, they have those warning lights on the dashboard. But we don't have those warning lights, but we do have warning signals. If we're feeling particularly fatigued, that's a sign. If you feel a pain in a certain area, that's a sign. If you're feeling discomfort in any area of your body, that's a sign that you are doing something that your body is telling you need to smarten up in some area. And so, yeah, I agreed with everything you guys said about that. And again, very worthwhile to watch. So that's the kind of things that I'd also suggest people work on, is just trying to get over their fears. And a lot of people are going to be going through some really tough times. I go down to Colombia each winter, and for instance, down there's a lot of people. I met a Venezuelan guy, and his living is getting up early. He gets on his bike and he pedals around the entire city of Cali trying to sell arepas. And he has his two little kids, because you know the whole story about people coming to Colombia from Venezuela and why they left. there's millions of Venezuelans right now, and they're just trying to get by. I see, actually, on my YouTube channel, which I'll just quickly mention right now, it's just my name, Thomas Dawson. Most of my videos so far have been travel videos from Colombia, and I do a lot of waterfall hunting here on Vancouver Island. But I also do have 3 videos that focus on my thoughts on health and healing and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, these Venezuelan people, a lot of them they can't get jobs yet because they're not legally in the country. So they're doing everything from street performing, and there's these 3 guys, they're doing all these acrobatics in the street, and then they'd walk around with their hats and get money. So they're just getting cash. And this other guy that sold arepas, he'd work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and it would just be cash. So they're not going to be getting any benefits like here in Canada. You know, they've got this package for people that have been laid off due to COVID, including myself. But man, there's so many people it's hard to fathom what some people are going through right now, like, you know, even people that are selling arepas. So, but anyway, yeah, that's my contribution, I guess, is just to try to get over sadness and anger and get over your playing that one role that is so limited and things like that. So I guess we're getting close to that 2 hours, Phil. So just looking through my notes for a second here, see if there's anything really important. As another example, a tumor is your body reacting to something that's going on inside it, and it's trying to wrap up something that's harming you. So it's just trying to protect itself. But there's that crucial point where if we keep doing these harmful things to ourselves, where the body's going to get overwhelmed, and it's going to be really, really hard to come back from that. So I urge people to take this time that they have right now. If you're sitting in your home, instead of watching Netflix all day, start watching some videos by Phil and Jeremy and the rest about the Human Unleashed, and be open-minded. Listen to Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai. How do you pronounce that again? Got it written down here. Shiva Ayyadurai, and his videos are getting taken down. And Dr. Rashid Buttar, he's talking about the same things that Dr. Shiva is. So
yeah, there's some very, very cool docs speaking up now. I hope that they're all safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Cool.
So tell people where they can find you, whether it's your YouTube channel, you already mentioned just your name. How can people find your Human Unleashed series?
Yeah, well, that's just at thehumanunleashed.com, and my website is pureactivity.net, and my YouTube channel is just under my own name, Phil Escott. And yeah, you can find everything there. Come along if you're interested in carnivory. Come to 100% Carnivore and Beyond on Facebook, which is a nice irreverent take on carnivory with you don't get thrown out just for mentioning broccoli there, you know. And it's a lot of fun. There's some amusing people, but there's also some incredibly knowledgeable people, and I love it. I've been really honoured to meet some amazing people through there. I mean, this is how I met the Human Unleashed guys, really, apart from Graeme, who I met in person first of all. And yeah, it's been a wonderful journey, really. It's so rewarding to get all the messages of people's successes that we get. But all we're doing is, like Thomas said at the beginning, not giving out medical advice. It's just we're telling people things to subtract, really, from their lifestyle. Which is why I did an online course as well for people with autoimmunity called the subtraction method. It's about taking stuff away instead of adding another chemical to see if you're going to cure this, you know. And this is what Thomas is saying too. I mean, take away all the dodgy influences and take away the bad emotionals as well. I mean, this is a real journey for people to take, because it's not so simple as just saying about diet. So I would say, yes, you know, don't watch Netflix, don't watch the mainstream news, except for to see how comical it's really getting for about 15 minutes every morning, because it's just repeated anyway, isn't it? So I'll watch it for a bit every morning. Actually, I've even given up doing that. You just kind of hear about it through the Facebook groups, all the lunacy that's going on. So there's so much stuff out there. There's an information overload of people who are waking up, and the two docs that Thomas mentioned there are absolutely fantastic. There's a few other ones as well. You know, there's some of the carnivore docs have woken up to this. There's Paul Saladino shouting about it, and now some vegans reported him, and now to the medical board for saying that perhaps this lockdown is not quite so necessary, and we need to get some herd immunity. You know, even within that's common sense within the standard thinking is being stamped down. It's extraordinary. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And I mean, thanks so much, Thomas. You gave me an opportunity to chat about stuff that I don't get an opportunity to chat about too much, and we must do another part sometime and go into some even more stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. I had 8 pages of notes. I think I got through maybe 3.5, so I'd like to do a part 2 as well. If people are interested in finding me online, I'm more known for photography at this point. So you can find me on multiple Instagram, Facebook by just typing in Thomas Dawson Photography. But as I mentioned, on YouTube, it's just my name, Thomas Dawson. I do already have 3 videos with very few views at this point, so I really want to get into doing more interviews like this with Phil and others, maybe some of the other guys from the Human Unleashed project. And that, to me, is the most important thing right now. I love photography, but, you know, this is human health, mentally, spiritually, physically, to me is the priority right now, and I want to get out that information as best as I can. So, yeah, that's the goal, and I want to thank you for being my very first guest, and and again, yeah, I hope we can do it again. And
it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure, Thomas. Thank you so much.
Pleasure is mine.
See you next time.
Okay, we'll stay in touch. Bye for now.
Bye.